Hey everybody, welcome back. In the previous episode, I covered everything that you need to know about sending email in Ruby on Rails. And unfortunately, I didn't get to implement all of those things before going live with my application, in particular the DNS and domain name related things. And as a result, I went live with my application and sent out a emailing to about 500 end users, and the email started to bounce back, and then I found out that my IP address got flagged as a spammer. So in this episode, I'm going to go over a few things I did to try to fix this problem and show you a few additional things I learned which will help your application emails avoid being flagged as spam. So let's get started. So the first thing I did in trying to resolve this problem was I contacted Ionos, which is my web hosting provider. After all, one of the first messages I got was a message from the Ionos mail server telling me that my account got locked. And one of the first things that they had me do to resolve this issue was create an SPF record on my domain. Now, if you recall in my last video, I talked about SPF records, DKIM records, and PTR records. And those are three different domain name related records that you could put on your domain to help avoid spam filters. I was able to add the SPF record to my domain from the DNS admin panel. It's basically a TXT type of record with a certain format for specifying that it's an SPF and a whitelist of mail servers and IP addresses that are allowed to send emails from that domain. So SPF could be used to validate that an email message is from the place that it says it's from. So let's say that your email server receives an email message. It could check the headers of that message, reference it against the DNS SPF record, and see whether the IP address and the sending mail server that sent this out corresponds to that SPF record. Now, in the case of somebody trying to spoof a particular domain name and send you a fraudulent email, they wouldn't have the IP address that is matched up with the SPF. So when that email gets sent out, the validation will occur and it won't match up with the originating server, so your email server could block the email. Also, an SMTP server can use the SPF record to block emails from being sent if they're coming from a server that doesn't match up under the servers that are whitelisted under the SPF record. And before I go on to talk about the next type of DNS record, the DKIM, I want to remind you to subscribe to my channel if you like this type of content, and give this video a thumbs up because it really helps with my analytics and get more viewership and keep me motivated to make more content. Also, I'm going to talk about some coding examples later, and if you want to see that code, then go ahead and join my Patreon. For the price of a cup of coffee, you could join my Patreon group and I'll give you access to that source code. Now, the second type of DNS-based spam protection system that I want to talk about is DKIM, or Domain Keys Identified Mail. Now, like with the SPF, or Sender Policy Framework, you'd also set this one up with a TXT type of record and put that as a record on your domain name. But this one works a little bit differently. DKIM consists of encryption keys, a public key, which is stored as a TXT record on your domain name, similar to how SPF works, and a private key, which is on your email server, which is used to make an encrypted signature on the email. This is pretty much the same concept that you would use when authenticating to GitHub with SSH keys, except that you're authenticating email signatures. So when sending, your email server or application will write a signature on the email message encrypted by your private key. When that email is received by the receiving server, it's going to check for the DKIM signature in the header, and then it could verify that it was written by your server's private key by looking at the public key on the domain name record. You can generate your public and private key pairs using a free generator tool like on this website named easydmark.com, or you can create them on the command line using OpenSSL commands. Or if you are using a specialized email service like Mailgun, they will provide you the DKIM key to put on your domain name records. If you're using Ruby on Rails, you can use the DKIM gem to perform the encrypted signing of the emails that you're sending out. However, I did not end up using this for my application yet because I found out that the SPF record was enough to get my emails working for now. Also, the web host that I am using does not support it at the mail server level, meaning the mail server doesn't have the ability to automatically generate those DKIM headers. Now, a third important type of DNS record to mention is the PTR, or pointer record, which does a reverse lookup on an IP address to associate it with a domain. So when you're working with a host name like gmail.google.com, the DNS system will resolve that domain name to an IP address of the server. But what if you want to go the other way and you have the IP address of the server and you want to find a domain name that points to that IP address? Well, there's a special type of record for that, and email servers use this similarly to the SPF record as a means of validating the origin of an email message. Now, while I want to mention that and talk about it here, I actually didn't have to implement this for my situation because the email server that I'm using is provided by a web hosting service, Ionos, and I'm using an SMTP relay. Because my application is not acting directly as an email server, I don't have to worry about this because the email server I'm connecting to already has this set up. So as I mentioned earlier, SPF alone seemed to be enough to get this system working again. However, before I do another bulk emailing, I want to make my emails compliant with a government regulation called the CAN-SPAM Act. Not only will compliance with this help me not get in trouble with the feds, but it also might boost my email's ability to get through an AI-based spam filter. The two major provisions of this email marketing law that really affect this application I'm working on is that we include an unsubscribe link and a physical address for our company. So let's go ahead and code that into the application. Alright, so this was a fairly simple modification to make. All I had to do was add a few lines to our template here for the emails. I've added an address line here, and I'm going to use the organization address for now. And I also added an unsubscribe link to the bottom of the emails. And the unsubscribe URL just goes to this route here, which is get. Unfortunately, I think the proper way of doing this would probably be a post method, but I had some difficulty getting post to work from an email, so we're just going to do get for now. It's less than ideal. A lot of websites have a special landing page where you have to submit a form to remove your email address, so this would go to a particular web page, but in this case I'm just going to have the controller execute for some logic. I'm actually getting kind of impatient working on this app, so I just want to get this done. And this works for now. So when you go over there to the unsubscribe controller, it uses the new unsubscribed email model, and then that model will add the email address to a blacklist of emails not to send out to. And as you can see here, I have a return statement in the mailer interactor classes to not send mail to unsubscribed email. Now the final thing that I want to do for this application is have a record of the emails that are being sent out, and one of the ways that we could do that is by making use of the observer design pattern, and that process is outlined here in the Rails guide for Action Mailer. Now I'm not a big fan of the observer design pattern. I think observers make your code really difficult to understand because sometimes when you're looking at one part of the code, you may not know that an observer is somewhere else and affects what you're doing in that section of code, and it could lead to a lot of confusion. However, I guess it works okay in a simple case like this where you're just logging some data and you just want to record a few details of the email that's going out. So in my application, I made an initializer that attaches the observer to Action Mailer, and then I have the email delivery observer itself right here, and it's pretty simple code. It just takes in this message and logs a few details about it. So let's take a look at what this message is and what the data type is that's coming in. Remember in a previous video, I criticized Ruby for making it difficult to understand the complex type of data that you're working with. And it's because of instances like this. So I normally do a breakpoint in my development environment just so I could do some inspections on an object like message, because I'm not really certain what all the methods are that are available on them and if I'm using them right. So I tried sending out a test email message, and here we are at that breakpoint. And as you can see here, it's a mail message type, which is associated with the RubyGem mail, which is a dependency inside of Action Mailer. And using the information, the properties on this, you could log details about your email message. It's not great because it doesn't seem to have the complete data about the email. For example, I don't seem to be able to access the full headers of the email that was sent out. And therefore it doesn't seem to be like the complete message that was sent out on the SMTP server. But I guess it's something for logging, and it's better than nothing. And another thing to note is that we reach this breakpoint after the email message has already been sent out. So one final thing. I got all this done and pushed to production, and I tried to do another mass emailing to my users. And then the email server locked up, and I found out that there seems to be an arbitrary rate limit on the number of emails I could send on this account, which seems to be about 50 messages per hour. I really wish Iono's technical support told me about this in advance, especially since I sent an email asking about any rate limits, and I didn't get a response. So next time I'm working on an application this scale, I'm probably going to have to buy capacity from an email service like Mailgun that specializes in everything we covered in this video, but is tailored to doing applications with mass emailing. So I hope you learned something about email today, and if you did, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.